I'd been married to my wife for 8 years, together for almost 11. We weren't perfect, but I honestly thought we were solid, the kind of couple that argued about dishes and money, not loyalty. Lately though, something felt off. Not dramatic at first, just wrong in small, nagging ways. She became sharper with me, irritated over nothing, snapping like I was constantly in her way. Affection dried up overnight. Phone always face down. New passwords. Privacy, she called it, like I was suddenly the villain for noticing. At the same time, she was working late more often, caring a lot more about her appearance, buying new clothes she never wore around me. When I asked, she'd roll her eyes and say I was paranoid or insecure. I wanted to believe her. I told myself every marriage hits dull patches. But deep down, there was this quiet panic growing, like my gut was screaming something my brain wasn't ready to hear yet. The lies didn't come all at once. They trickled in, small and casual, the kind you almost ignore because calling them out feels petty. She'd say she was with coworkers, but couldn't remember their names. She'd claim her phone died, yet it was always fully charged when I saw it later. One night she told me she'd gone straight to bed early. I found the shower still warm and her makeup wiped off like she'd just come home. When I asked questions, her attitude flipped instantly. I wasn't concerned, I was controlling. I wasn't confused, I was accusing. Every conversation turned into me apologizing for things I didn't do. I started doubting myself, wondering if I really was becoming some jealous, insecure version of myself. But the stories kept changing, and the more she talked, the less sense any of it made. That's when I stopped trusting her words and started paying attention to her actions instead. The actual discovery wasn't dramatic at first. No hotel room, no lipstick on a collar. It was a random Tuesday. I was using our shared tablet to pay a bill when a message notification popped up. Her name wasn't on it, but the tone was unmistakable. Familiar. Intimate. The kind of message you don't send to just a coworker. I shouldn't have opened it. I know that. But my hands were already shaking, and my heart was racing like it already knew the truth. One message turned into a thread. Inside jokes I'd never heard. Complaints about me. Plans that clearly didn't involve work. Then a photo, nothing explicit, but enough. A mirror shot. Her smile. The one she stopped giving me months ago. I remember sitting there in silence, rereading the same lines over and over, waiting for some explanation to magically appear. Something that would make it innocent. It never did. In that moment, every weird argument, every late night, every insult she threw at me suddenly lined up. The doubt was gone. What replaced it was worse. I didn't confront her right away. That surprised me. I thought I'd explode, scream, throw something, but instead I went numb. I closed the tablet, put it back exactly where it was, and sat there for hours replaying everything in my head. I needed to see how far she'd take the lie if I gave her the chance. When she came home that night, she kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong. Asked how my day was. Complained about traffic. I watched her perform this normal version of our life while knowing she'd been sending messages to another man just hours earlier. It made my stomach turn. She told me she was exhausted and went straight to the shower. I could hear her phone buzzing from the bathroom counter. Messages I wasn't supposed to know about. That's when the anger finally cut through the shock. Not just because she cheated, but because she could look me in the eyes and lie so easily. And that told me this wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. I didn't plan it. I just walked into the bathroom, picked up her phone, and said his name out loud. That was it. Her face drained instantly. No confusion. No, what are you talking about? Just pure panic, followed by anger like I'd crossed some unforgivable line. She started fast, denial first. Said I was misreading things. Said he was just a friend who understood her better than I did. When I mentioned the messages, the photos, the timing, she pivoted. Suddenly it was my fault. I was distant. I didn't listen. I didn't make her feel special anymore. Every excuse came out layered with attitude, like she was annoyed I'd ruined her night. When I asked how long it had been going on, she hesitated. That pause said more than any answer. Then she lied again. Gave me a timeline that didn't match anything I'd already seen. I realized in real time that I wasn't just confronting an affair, I was confronting someone who had been rewriting our marriage behind my back and thought she could keep doing it if she talked fast enough. After the excuses ran out, something inside me finally broke loose. The shock faded and raw anger took its place. I wasn't yelling at first, that came later, but my voice went cold in a way I didn't recognize as my own. I asked her the same questions again, slower this time, watching her twist every answer. Each lie landed harder than the last. She rolled her eyes, sighed, acted inconvenienced by my pain. At one point she actually said, "Can we not do this right now?" like her cheating was a scheduling conflict. That's when I snapped. I told her she didn't get to decide when I processed betrayal. I told her she'd burned every ounce of trust we had. She fired back immediately, sharp and cruel, listing my flaws like she'd been rehearsing them for months. It wasn't just defensive, it was calculated. She needed me to be the bad guy so she didn't have to face what she'd done. Standing there, listening to her justify destroying our marriage, I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding or a rough patch. This was a full-on collapse, and I was standing in the wreckage trying to breathe. That night spiraled fast. One minute we were arguing in the bathroom, the next she was throwing clothes into a bag, saying she needed space. Space from the mess she created. I asked where she was going, and she smirked before saying she'd stay with a friend. She didn't say which one. She didn't have to. As she slammed drawers and muttered insults under her breath, reality finally hit me in waves. This wasn't some temporary crisis. She wasn't remorseful, scared, or even sad. She was irritated that she got caught. When she walked out, she didn't look back. No tears. No apology. Just the door closing and the sound of my life cracking in half. I slept on the couch that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship like a detective trying to find the exact second it died. My phone stayed silent. No message asking if I was okay. No regret. That silence hurt more than any fight ever could. The next few days were a blur of anger, disbelief, and emptiness. I woke up expecting to hear her voice, only to remember she wasn't there. Every little thing in the house reminded me of her absence and of the betrayal. Her perfume on a scarf. A coffee cup she left on the counter. Her side of the bed, untouched. I went through cycles of rage and sorrow so fast I could barely catch my breath. One moment I wanted to confront her again, throw every accusation at her until she broke. The next, I curled up in silence, imagining a life where none of this happened. My friends called, but I could barely speak. I'd laugh at nothing, then suddenly feel hollow, as if someone had punched a hole in my chest. I realized this wasn't just about cheating, it was about trust, respect, and the life we built together unraveling in front of me. I was grieving not just the relationship, but the version of us I thought existed. And the worst part? I knew I couldn't rewind it. After a week of sleepless nights and endless replaying of every lie, I finally started facing the reality. She wasn't coming back the same. The us I knew was gone. Every denial, every excuse, every smirk in the middle of our fight made that painfully clear. I couldn't ignore it anymore or pretend it was a phase. I started keeping track, messages, timelines, little inconsistencies. Not out of paranoia, but to remind myself that what I felt wasn't imagined. Each note, each screenshot, each small confirmation was like adding bricks to a wall I didn't want to build, separating the life I had from the life I was about to step into. It was brutal, but necessary. Denial had protected me for a few days. Anger had carried me for a few nights. But reality doesn't give breaks. You have to stare it in the face, and I did. Reluctantly, painfully, but I did. After days of circling between grief and rage, I realized I had to make a decision. I couldn't stay frozen, watching my marriage bleed out. Do I fight for her? Do I leave? The answer wasn't simple. Every memory of us, the good mornings, the late night talks, the vacations, pulled me in one direction. But every lie, every betrayal, every calculated smirk pushed me toward the other. I spent hours pacing, thinking, even talking to myself in the mirror. I asked the hard questions. Can I ever trust her again? Will our marriage ever feel safe, real, honest? Can I look at her without remembering this? The answers were painfully clear. Some things, once broken, don't really mend. You can glue the pieces back together, but the cracks remain. By the end of that night, I knew my next step wasn't about revenge or forcing closure. It was about protecting myself, my dignity, and my sanity. And that meant making a choice, one that would shape everything that followed. The next day, I called her. Not to argue, not to beg, not to cry, but to set boundaries. I told her she needed to leave the house for a while, that I needed space to think, and that I wouldn't tolerate any more lies or manipulation. Her response? Eye rolls, huffs, and the classic "you're overreacting" line. But I didn't flinch. For the first time, I felt a small flicker of control. I wasn't pleading. I wasn't begging. I wasn't letting her dictate how I processed this. I told her she could collect her things later, but until then, I needed silence and distance. It was cold, but necessary. As the door closed behind her, I felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief because I had taken my first real step toward reclaiming my life. Dread because the coming days would be harder than anything I'd faced yet. But at least now, I had a boundary. And boundaries were my lifeline. With her gone, the house felt impossibly quiet. Too quiet. I wandered through rooms that used to feel like home and realized they were full of ghosts, memories of laughter, arguments, and small everyday moments now tinged with betrayal. I started small, making my bed, doing the laundry, cooking for myself. Tiny routines, but they were anchors. Each small accomplishment reminded me that life could continue, even if it felt hollow. I also reached out to friends I had neglected, people who mattered and would hold me accountable, not judge me. It wasn't about healing completely yet. Not even close. But it was about proving to myself that I could function without her presence controlling every corner of my mind. That I could survive this, even if surviving felt like the bare minimum. Days turned into weeks, and the raw shock slowly softened into something quieter: acceptance. Not happiness, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. I began to see the affair for what it really was: her choice, her betrayal, not a reflection of my worth. I stopped replaying the messages constantly. I stopped imagining confrontations that would never happen. Instead, I focused on myself, my routines, my work, my friends. I allowed myself to feel sadness without letting it consume me. For the first time since discovering the truth, I could think about the future without immediately seeing her face in it. It wasn't easy. Some nights I still cried alone. Some mornings I woke with anger lingering like a shadow. But slowly, day by day, I realized I was building a life that didn't revolve around her lies. And that realization, small as it was, felt like the first genuine step forward. Months passed, and with each day, I felt a little more like myself again. I started investing in things I had ignored: hobbies, friendships, even my own health. The apartment, once a monument to our shared life, became mine again. I rearranged furniture, put up pictures that made me smile, and let the silence settle without fear. I also confronted the truth that forgiveness wasn't necessary for my peace. I didn't need her apology to move forward. The affair was a chapter one couldn't rewrite, but I could decide how it ended in my story. I stopped checking her social media, stopped wondering about his name, and finally, stopped letting her choices dictate my emotions. It wasn't about erasing the pain. It was about reclaiming my power and understanding that my life, my happiness, and my trust weren't tied to someone who chose to break them. I was learning to breathe again. Looking back now, the betrayal still stings, but it no longer defines me. I learned that love isn't enough when trust is gone, and that some people's choices say more about them than about you. I also learned the value of boundaries, self-respect, and refusing to let someone else's lies control your life. I'm not bitter, though I admit I was. I'm cautious, wiser, and fiercely protective of my own peace. I know now that moving forward doesn't mean forgetting, it means choosing yourself, even when it hurts. For anyone going through something similar, trust your instincts, set boundaries, and don't apologize for protecting your heart. Pain is inevitable, but it doesn't have to be permanent. You can rebuild, stronger than before. And sometimes, the hardest truth can lead to the life you were meant to live all along.